What is that? Go back and begin by faith to obediently do what you did when you were first saved that you're not doing anymore.
Join Dr. David Jeremiah for his series Escape the Coming Night, next time on Turning Point.
5:30 a.m. and 7 p.m. Central on American Family Radio.
We cannot continue to spend this way. We have a debt that's bigger than our economy.
If you were against President Obama's deficits and now you're for the Republican deficits, isn't that the very definition of hypocrisy?
What happened? Where are the conservatives we thought we were electing?
The dirty little secret is that by and large, both parties don't care about the debt. I want people to feel uncomfortable. The spending bill's 700 pages, and there will be no amendments. And they're like, but it's Thursday, and we like to be on vacation on Fridays.
There have to be some conservatives left. What happened to the idea of being a fiscal conservative? Where are they?
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged.
An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to Free for All Friday on Focal Point on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Congenial, convivial, amiable, and effervescent.
As always.
As always. Glad to be with you. The program, as always, is the home of muscular Christianity. Focal Point on American Family Radio. We're going to get into this budget deal, more on the memo, but we're going to identify in the Senate all the Republicans that went off the reservation on this deal, including Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is turning out to be a major disappointment to me. He voted for this deficit-busting budget. So anyway, I don't know what's going on with Senator Cruz. Disappointed me on this vote. Sure, he's got his reasons, but none of them, frankly, are going to be good enough for me. So we'll break down who the good guys are and the bad guys were in that deal as we carry on through the program. Chuck Schumer, by the way, called for a big-time military parade back in 2014. He's the guy that's railing against Donald Trump. What a waste of money. What a colossal waste of money to have a parade, the military parade. That's Chuck Schumer 2018. Back in 2014, when you know who was the commander-in-chief, well, it was a different story. All right, well, let's turn our attention to the Word of God. We are using a schedule that you can find at pray.afa.net, a scripture passage for every day and a prayer that's formed using the very words of that passage of Scripture. Now, we're in the end of Job chapter 9 and all of chapter 10 for the reading today. And this today, as we've had a couple of days in the past, is a prayer that I've written for someone who's going through suffering and feels like there's something unjust about it, that the things that are happening to you are unjust. Maybe that's the situation you're in, you're suffering, you're experiencing some adversity, some reversals, and it seems completely unjust to you. Well, this prayer is for you. So you pray this for yourself as I'm praying it along. Maybe you know somebody in your family, good friend. They're feeling they're really under it, and it's not fair. You can put yourself in their place and pray this prayer by proxy for them. Now, as we look at what Job was going through at the end of Job chapter 9, a period of unrelieved suffering, and what Job says, look, as it seems to me like every day is the same. Nothing good seems to happen in my life. My whole life seems to be dreary and dismal. He says this in verse 25, my days are swifter than a runner. They flee away. They see no good. They go by like skiffs of reed, like an eagle swooping on the prey. Now, finally, one day, Job says, okay, that's it. I'm just going to deal with it. I'm going to put on a happy face. I'm going to square my shoulders, and I'm going to I'm going to face right into it. I'm going to stop complaining. I'm just going to deal with it. But the reality of it is it didn't work. The reality of his suffering crashed in, And it just seems to him that he is still under God's judgment and that nothing he does makes a difference. He can't seem to get an audience with God where he could make a case for his own innocence. There are no judges out there who could consider Job's case and acquit him before God. Since God's the judge, there's no judge above him that God has to answer to. This is what he says in verse 27. If I say I will forget my complaint, I will put off my sad face and be of good cheer, I become afraid of all my suffering. For I know that you, God, will not hold me innocent. I shall be condemned. Why then do I labor in vain? He is not a man as I am, that I might answer him, that we should come to trial together. There is no arbiter between us who might lay his hand on us both. So he goes on to say in chapter 10, he just decides, look, I hate my life. I loathe my life. And I see no reason not to tell God exactly what I think. No point in pussyfooting around this anymore, using nuance, using euphemisms. I'm going to lay it straight out. So he tells God that it looks to me, Job says, like you're picking on me. I see a lot of people who are worse sinners than I am. And, you know, God, they are doing just fine. Here's what he says. I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you contend against me. Are your days as the days of man, or your years as a man's years, that you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin? You're picking on me, is what he's saying, although you know that I am not guilty, and there is none to deliver out of your hand. And then he reminds God, look, God, you are the one who made me. You knit me together in my mother's womb, and you have always up to this point looked after me. He says, your hands fashioned and made me, and now you have destroyed me altogether. Remember that you have made me like clay. Will you return me now to the dust? Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? You clothed me with skin and flesh, knit me together with bones and sinews. You have granted me life and steadfast love, and your care has preserved my spirit. But now he says it looks like and feels like you have turned against me. He said, look, if I'm innocent, I'm just as miserable as I'd be if I were guilty and deserved it. He says, yet these things, my innocence, you hid in your heart. I know that this was your purpose. If I sin, you watch me. You do not acquit me of my iniquity. If I am guilty, woe to me. If I am in the right, I cannot lift up my head, for I am filled with disgrace, and look on my affliction. And then he says, look, just when it seems like things are getting better, I get hit with the fresh wave of difficulties and pains. Were my head lifted up, you would hunt me like a lion, and again work wonders against me. You renew your witnesses against me, and increase your vexation toward me, and bring fresh troops against me. So he starts actually wishing that he had never been born, and starts to think that he would actually be better off without God. He says, why did you bring me out from the womb? Would that I had died before any eye had seen me, as though I had not been carried from the womb to the grave. Are not my days few? Then cease and leave me alone, that I may find a little cheer before I go. I shall not return. The land of gloom is like thick darkness, where light is as thick darkness. Well, again, let's pray for those that are hurting among us. Sovereign Lord, because of my suffering, my days go by swifter than a runner. They go by like skiffs of reed, but they contain nothing good. I feel as though I have been unjustly condemned by you, and that my suffering exceeds my sin. It seems that I will be condemned by you, and that you will not hold me innocent no matter what I do. My labor to be righteous seems to be in vain. Even should I wash myself with snow and cleanse my hands with lye, it looks as though you will plunge me into a pit. It frustrates me that you are not a man as I am, that I might answer you. There is no arbiter between us who could compel you to stand trial on charges that you have unfairly afflicted me. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. It seems as though you are destroying me altogether and returning me to dust. At times I wish that I had died before any eye had seen me. I plead with you to take your rod of punishment away from me and remove from me the dread of you that terrifies me, for then I could speak to you without fear. Amen.
I've been an advocate for biblically responsible investing for many, many years, 30 years, because I'm an advocate for permanent income. This is Dan Celia from Financial Issues. I remember having two sisters that had trust funds that I managed. They were family trust. They were the third generation. They were in their 80s. They had more money than you could shake a stick at. They didn't want for anything. And even them, at one point in time, said to me, do we have enough income to pay our bills, our electric bill? That's all they cared about. I'm telling you, you're going to get to that point. So it's not an investment. It's a gift. It's permanent income.
Find out about charitable gift annuities when you call 800-326-4543, extension 345. 800-326-4543, extension 345. Or by visiting afafoundation.net.
The truth will set you free. My name is Abraham Hamilton III, and this is the Hamilton Corner. California has enacted the FACT Act, which forces pro-life crisis pregnancy centers to prominently display notices informing clients that California offers low-cost and even free abortions, and lists the phone numbers to contact the abortion clinics. This case is more egregious and potentially has more far-reaching implications for free speech and religious liberty than the Masterpiece Cake Shop case. Pro-life pregnancy centers are required to direct women to abortion clinics. The National Institute of Family and Life Advocates has sued California in NIFLA versus Becerra, which has reached the Supreme Court. Please pray for this case.
Listen to the Hamilton Corner, weekdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Central on AFR. For more from Abraham Hamilton III, Public Policy Analyst for the American Family Association.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back. Free for All Friday here on American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Got some news on the religious liberty front. Here is a winnable war moment from today. A court in North Carolina has ordered the state to pay $300,000 to a magistrate because the state forced her out of her position, fired her, because she politely declined to perform a same-sex wedding union. Her name was Gail Myrick. She was a magistrate. She would not perform ceremonies for same-sex couples. She worked it out with her supervisor to adjust her schedule so that she wouldn't be on duty to perform weddings when a same-sex wedding was scheduled to be held. Her supervisor made that accommodation for her, and the state said, no, we're not going to accept that. We're not going to allow that. Even though everybody agrees to it, even though it's entirely voluntary for everybody, even though your supervisors agreed to do it, we're not going to let you do it. We are going to force you to violate your own conscience. And a judge found that the state of North Carolina had violated her civil liberties. So this is the state of North Carolina was forced to provide her with $122,600 in back pay, $173,000 in compensation, $115,000 for her attorney's fees, and $37,000 in retirement contributions. When she got bounced, she was just, I believe, 2 weeks away from retirement with full benefits. And they bounced her out of there, made her violate her conscience, or because she wouldn't violate her conscience, they bounced her 2 weeks before she was set to receive or secure her retirement benefits. That's our winnable war moment. And again, I told you that maybe we have reached peak gay, peak pink, if you want to use that analogy. Maybe the forces of sexual deviancy that have been such a nuisance for our culture, done so much active harm, maybe that tide is beginning to recede and the forces of righteousness and sexual normalcy are beginning to reassert themselves. Remember, this is the third one of those we've seen this week where someone sticking up for biblical sexuality, a biblical understanding of marriage, has won. Now, here's a story from CNS News about Melania Trump. Now, this is a pastor who said he heard it from a reliable source. So I'm going to assume for the sake of argument that there's something to this, and it fits with what we know of Melania Trump. But according to this pastor, who's one of the evangelicals that has prayed with Donald Trump in the White House, Melania Trump demanded that there be a spiritual cleansing of the White House before she took up residency there. She knew that there were demonic and idolatrous objects in there. The Clintons left some of them in there since the Haiti days. They actually honeymooned in Haiti. They witnessed a ritual performed by a voodoo priest, and there were Haitian symbols, Haitian icons in the White House that the Clintons brought in there. Bring them in there just as like little trinkets and tourist attractions and sort of object art from their vacation. But, Melania knew better than that. There's demonic significance. She did not want to, and remember we've talked about this before. I know a lot of you have done this. If you've got occultic or idolatrous objects in your house, might even be a painting, some kind of object, an amulet or whatever, that has occult significance, it provides a legal ground for demonic spirits. They will attach themselves to these objects, and then as long as that object is in the home and you're giving that object permission to be there by not removing it, those demons then have the legal right to be in your home. So anyway, Melania Trump apparently aware of some of that. She said, look, we got to get these things out of here. So they prayed through the White House, did some anointing, and cleaned that place out. The only thing of all the religious artifacts that were in the White House, the only thing she kept was one cross on one wall in the White House. Everything else was compromised. So anyway, spiritual cleansing at the White House, good on Melania and good for those that helped her do that thing. Now, I've got a column that I've written for today. Is it up yet,
yes, sir.
Jeffrey?
Yes, it is, and it's now pinned to your Facebook and Twitter page.
Pinned to the Facebook page, so you go to the Facebook page, you'll be able to see it right there. It's a column I wrote in response to an article that was in Salon.com. This is a uber left-wing website, and the article was written by an author by the name of Valerie Tirico. Remember that name, first name Valerie Tirico. She wrote the article entitled, "Why is the Bible so badly written?" She says this, and she's just wrong about the very first statement she makes in this article. Millions of evangelicals and other Christian fundamentalists believe that the Bible was dictated by God to men who acted essentially as human transcriptionists. Now, that's not true. This is not what we believe about the inspiration of the New Testament. We believe that all the authors of the New Testament fully preserved their personalities. They weren't just dictating machines. That's why each author, that's why Paul has a different style of writing than Peter does. He has a different style of writing than John does or than Jude does. They have very distinctive literary styles. Even the writers of the Gospels have different styles. Matthew's style is different than Mark's. Mark is very abbreviated and to the point and brief. Matthew, much more expansive. Luke is written for a Gentile audience, so he explains some things that would be obvious to the Jewish audience that for whom Matthew was written. And then John's Gospel, completely different than the other Gospels. Why? Because the authors weren't taking dictation. The Holy Spirit was dwelling in them. The Holy Spirit was bringing God's thoughts to their mind and helping them to form God's words through their personality on paper. So what you have in the New Testament is God's word, God's truth being poured through, expressed through human personality. And this is her first statement in the column, and it was wrong. And so she said, look, if God's dictating the Bible, then he is a terrible writer. She says you've got mixed messages, you have repetition, you have bad fact-checking, you have awkward constructions, you have inconsistent voice, that's grammatical voice, passive, active, and middle. You have weak character development. You have boring tangents, contradictions, passages where nobody can tell what the writer meant to convey. That does not sound like a book that was dictated by a deity. And the point that I make is, and what happened, by the way, after I started working on my column, I wanted to call this column up. I had a print copy in front of me, but I wanted to call up the website and read it right off the website, and I discovered that it wasn't there. In other words, Salon, and the reason is Salon, their editors had reached the conclusion that this article was so badly written, they had to pull it down off of their website. So it's not even up there. So she still has it over on her own website, but the real question is not why is the Bible so badly written, Valerie, but why is your article so badly written? One writer for the Washington Free Beacon, a journalist by the name of F. Bill McMorris, said this, among other grammatical and literary gaffes: Ms. Tirico used 3 adverbs in one paragraph. She makes rampant use of split infinitives, and she misconstrues the word ironically. And that was just for starters. So we don't have to go through and deconstruct this whole column because Salon has already done this for us, but she says the reason it's so badly written is that it was written by fallible human beings. And we make the point that the New Testament was written, the entire Bible was written by authors, human authors, who were fallible in and of themselves, but were indwelt by the Spirit, and he guided them in the writing of the Scripture. The Bible says they were carried along by the Holy Spirit. Remember, Paul says in 2 Timothy 3:16 that all Scripture, and the construction he uses there in Greek, all Scripture, means any and all. In other words, what Paul is saying, no matter where you dip your toe into the Word of God, from Genesis 1:1 to Revelation 20, no matter where you dip your toe, you're in touch with something that has been breathed out by God. Any part and every part of the Scripture has been breathed out by God. That inspiration flowed through the apostles and others as they wrote these words. So it's truth being poured through human personality. Now, if Mrs. Tirico wanted to find a holy book that was dictated by a god, she's going to have to settle for the Quran. Remember, Muslims believe that the Quran was dictated word for word because Muhammad was illiterate. He couldn't read, he couldn't write, so he couldn't have written a copy of anything because he was illiterate. So they believe God dictated it to him word for word, and he relayed it then to scribes that wrote it down. Now, Ms. Tirico makes the ludicrous claim that nearly half the books of the New Testament make false authorship claims. Now, this is ridiculous if you know anything about modern New Testament scholarship. Modern scholarship has found ample reason to believe that the books were written by exactly the men to whom they are attributed. No reason to doubt that Matthew was written by the disciple who also went by the name Levi, the tax collector. No reason to doubt that Mark was written by the nephew of Barnabas. No reason to doubt that Luke was written by the physician who accompanied Paul on 2 of his missionary journeys. And no reason to doubt that the Gospel of John was written by the disciple whom Jesus loved. And great men down through history have acknowledged the Bible's beauty and power. Here's what Napoleon said about the Scripture: it is a living being with action, power, which invades everything that opposes its extension. Sir Isaac Newton, one of the great scientists in all of human history, we account the Scriptures of God to be the most sublime philosophy. I find more sure marks of authenticity in the Bible than in any profane history whatsoever. The great philosopher Immanuel Kant I believe that the existence of the Bible is the greatest benefit to the human race. Any attempt to belittle it, I believe, is a crime against humanity. Victor Hugo, one of the great authors of all history, England has two books, he said, the Bible and Shakespeare. England made Shakespeare, but the Bible made England. Charles Dickens said the New Testament is the very best book that ever was or ever will be known to the world. All of which makes me say, Valerie, who?
This is Dr. Richard Lamb, president of Southern Evangelical Seminary. Welcome to Bringing Every Thought Captive. Yesterday I shared with you that I thought that it was time to take the extraordinary measure of appointing Harvard Law professor and famed civil libertarian Alan Dershowitz as special counsel with subpoena power to go in and find out just how bad it is at the Justice Department and the FBI. How many rogue actors are there that have deceived the American people by deceiving courts and getting warrants under false pretenses? Our Constitution declares that the government gains its authority from the consent of the governed. If these grave matters are not thoroughly investigated and addressed, then I withdraw my consent. For starters, the FISA courts and all the extraordinary legal apparatus that accompanies them must go unless we can get complete accountability. What about the terrorist threats, you may ask? Benjamin Franklin, at another crisis point in our history, declared, quote, "Those who would give up essential liberty, purchase a little temporary safety, deserve neither liberty nor safety," end quote. I agree. If the abuses indicated in the House memo are substantially true, then we face a greater threat to our freedoms from our own government than we do from the terrorists. Frankly, as for me and my house, unless these apparent abuses can be rooted out and fixed, and guarantees put in place and safeguards to make sure that it doesn't happen again, then we'll take our chances with the terrorists rather than an out-of-control Justice Department and its power to trample Americans' liberties on a daily basis. This is Richard Land.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio. Listen to the audio podcast or download today's program at afr.net. You can also read Brian Fisher's columns at afa.net.
Welcome back to Free for All Friday on Focal Point, American Family Radio. Brian Fisher is my name. Great to have you in the conversation today on board. Here's a kind of a cute little story from Florida. You know how they have those machines where you put a quarter in or 50 cents and you have the little claw comes down that you can pick out a stuffed animal?
Yeah.
Well, this guy was so set, this kid, see how old he was so set on getting a stuffed toy from that vending machine that he wound up getting stuck inside it.
Oh, wow.
This was at a Beef O'Brady's restaurant. He climbed into the game to get the toy that he was going after. An off-duty firefighter contacted his colleagues. They rescued the boy from inside the arcade claw machine. The boy's age was not released, probably because he was about 12 or 13. No, just kidding. He was in there for about 5 minutes and just sat quietly on top of the toys while the firefighters worked to get him out. He went in, but obviously he couldn't come back out the same way. Minimal damage to the machine. He was able to rejoin his family for dinner, but the ordeal wasn't entirely fruitless. He was given a toy afterward. Happy ending to that story.
Boy, he had to work to get
work for that
I'm
thing.
telling you.
He deserved that toy.
Getting through that small opening, it'd be like a mouse going under a door. There's no room, or that squid that.
I mean those little doors are tiny.
Yeah.
You know, we've seen video of octopuses getting through real tiny little openings.
Amazing.
So maybe we'll make this guy an honorary octopus.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's talk about the budget and this what I think is just a catastrophic decision last night that the Senate passed this, the House passed it, Senate passed it, and this thing went to Donald Trump's desk, and he signed it. So it is a done deal. It's law. It's the law of the land. They've got a budget now set for 2 years, which will boost spending by $300 billion. We were already $20 trillion in debt. This just blows the caps off of everything. $300 billion in increased spending, 100-something billion for the military, another 100-something billion for social spending, for welfare spending and social programs. So in my mind, this thing is just a complete boondoggle. It's a fiscal catastrophe. It's a complete abandonment. You know, somebody said what the Senate did last night is they repealed the Tea Party. And that's exactly right. They repealed the Tea Party. Remember, those of us that were involved in the Tea Party movement, it was about getting control of the budget. It was about overturning Obamacare, getting that repealed, and bringing some kind of financial sanity back to Washington, D.C. That's been blown completely out of the tub. You know, in the Tea Party era, we campaigned for promises to restrain federal spending and repeal Obamacare. Those are the two things that we emphasized at our Tea Party rallies. And so that's what the Republicans promised they were going to deliver. You give us the House, you give us the Senate, we are going to restrain spending. And so we gave them the House of Representatives. And did they restrain spending? Absolutely not. What did they tell us? We've got to have the Senate. You don't understand how things work here in Washington, D.C. It's not enough to have a majority in the House. You got to have the ability to get stuff through the Senate. So give us control of the Senate and watch us go to town on the deficit. So we gave them the Senate in 2014. And what happened? Did they restrain spending? Absolutely not. And what did they tell us? You don't understand how things work in D.C. You got to have control of the White House, because we can pass good legislation and we can send it to the president. If he vetoes it, that's it. So it's not enough to have control of the House, control of the Senate. We've got to have control of the Oval Office. Got to have control of the White House. That's what we got to have. So we gave them control of the White House. And remember, we put this banner up on the wall of our studio after what happened in 2016, where we gave the Republicans control of every branch of the government. And our motto right on the wall was no more excuses. And I repeat, no more excuses. And what are we getting from the Republicans? Nothing but excuses.
Yeah.
So it's just ridiculous. You know, they even funded Planned Parenthood on this budget deal. This is one of the things they promised. We're going to stop funding Planned Parenthood. Donald Trump promised us he would do that. And it's right in there. It's in the budget. They're going to get funded $500 million, just like they got last year. Republicans that voted for this thing voted to fund Planned Parenthood. So this thing is just a complete, in my mind, a complete and utter debacle. Republicans abandoning every single promise that they made to us. So Republicans last night in the Senate repealed the Tea Party. You know, if we had one tangible achievement to show for all of the dust that we raised as the Tea Party, is we did get them to enact spending caps. That was as a result of the 2011 standoff. And that worked. Those spending caps kept a lid to a certain degree on federal spending. Well, what the Senate did, or the Congress did, over the last couple of days, is they blew those spending caps completely into outer space. They don't mean a single solitary thing now. So it's business as usual, both parties agreeing to give the other side money for the stuff that's important to them. So it's just, ladies and gentlemen, it's just absurd to agree that's beyond my ability to capture in words.
Brian, I have a question for you. I mean, these tax cuts were a really good thing.
Yeah.
But now, if you're going to increase spending along with tax cuts, I mean, how's that going to work out?
Not going to work out.
It's not.
Yeah. If you spend more but take in less, then obviously things are going to get bad. If you have more outgo than income, then things are going to get bad. And if you have more outgo and your income reduces, you have less money coming in, then it's going to get bad quicker.
Yeah, that makes sense.
In a bigger hurry.
But if you reduce the spending and have tax cuts, then it's a good thing.
Yeah,
because
if you reduce the spending to match the drop in federal income from tax cuts, then everything is gravy. Everything is great. And by the way,
so this is it essentially may have an effect of canceling out the tax cuts in a sense.
Yeah, well, they're going to be back to raising taxes before long. You just start wondering, do any of these numbers mean anything to these people anymore? It's like we're playing with monopoly money. It's like it's just completely irrelevant to them that we're $20 trillion in debt. Like that doesn't mean anything to them. It doesn't register with them. They think they can just keep spending and spending and spending. And everybody can tell you this. I mean, a lot of people have learned this the hard way. If you keep spending more than you make, you eventually are going to hit a brick wall. That is a law of nature. Nobody gets to dodge that. There's going to be a terrible price to pay if you keep that up long enough. Now, you can get away with it for a while, can't you? You can go get another credit card and spend that one, then go get another credit card and spend that one to the limit. Seems like you're doing just great. You're going out to dinner and you're buying yourself nice stuff, going on nice vacations. Doesn't seem like it's affecting you at all, but then eventually the bill comes due and you can't pay it.
Sooner
and
or later.
Crash and burn. It happens to everybody. It'll happen to us.
That's why my wife pays the bills. Actually, I've hit a few walls in my day.
I've hit a wall or two in myself.
As we all
we are essentially though, as a country, playing with monopoly money. There's not really anything to back up what we owe.
And I don't know if you looked up the inflation rate in Weimar, Germany.
I couldn't find it.
Okay.
It was pretty so high. They were just doing by numbers. How many. 450 to 1 is kind of
because I think the inflation in Venezuela now is like 400%. That's what made us kind of
4,000.
Now I've got the roll call results from this vote yesterday. And I want to let me start on the House side. The vote, 29% of House Republicans voted against the budget deal. 29%. 3 out of 10. 7 out of 10 Republicans in the House voted for this budget-busting budget. 62% of House Democrats voted against it, not because they are fiscally responsible. They're ticked because there wasn't anything in this thing for the Dreamers. That's why they were upset with it. Nancy Pelosi led the effort on that. You still had 73 Democrats that voted yes on this thing. 67 Republicans voted against it. Vast majority were fiscal conservatives, said, look, we're not going to run the debt up to the stratosphere any longer. There are 36 members of the House Freedom Caucus. About 27 of them voted no on this budget buster. Louis Gohmert voted no, Jeb Hensarling, John Radcliffe. 11 freshmen voted against the bill. So they probably just got elected on a cut spending, and they remembered their promises. So that's good. That's 11 the freshmen voted against this thing, but a lot of their colleagues voted for it. Now, on the Senate side, I'm just going to run down the senators that voted for and against this thing. Take me a little while. I may have to go into the phone call time. By the way, I want to take your calls on this budget deal, what the Republicans are doing to us in the Senate. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. What's your reaction to what the Republicans are doing to us, did to us last night in Congress? 888-589-8840. Here we go. Lamar Alexander, he was a big fat yes. Barrasso from Wyoming, a big fat yes. Roy Blunt from Missouri, a big fat yes. John Boozman from Arkansas, a big fat yes. Richard Burr from North Carolina was a no vote. Good for you, Richard Burr. Mary Capito from West Virginia, big fat yes. Let's see. Bill Cassidy from Louisiana was a no. Good for you, Bill. Thad Cochran from the home state of Mississippi A big fat yes. So Thad Cochran and Roger Wicker, the two senators from Mississippi, they both voted with the swamp. They both voted with the swamp creatures. I'm not saying either one of them is a swamp creature, but they voted with the swamp and with the swamp creatures. They were both a yes vote. Let's see, Susan Collins from Maine, she was a big fat yes. Bob Corker from Tennessee, he was a no vote. Good for you, Bob. I'll give you the rest of the list when we come back, including Ted Cruz.
Jeremiah 20 verse 9 says, "His word was in my heart like a burning fire." Hi, this is Alex McFarland, co-host of Exploring the Word. You know, I was in my second year of college as a new believer when God put in my heart an insatiable desire to read His Word. And that daily reading of God's Word has shaped who I am. And every day on Exploring the Word, Bert Harper and I teach the Word so that fire and love for Scripture will be in your heart as well.
Exploring the Word, weekday afternoons at 3 Central on American Family Radio.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
In September of last year, you and I were glued to our TV sets as we watched Hurricane Harvey wreak havoc in Texas. Many communities suffered great damage. In fact, almost 400,000 families had their homes flooded. 80% of them no insurance, nowhere to turn. That's where you and I get a chance to be the hands and feet of Jesus. 8 Days of Hope, we've been around for 12 years, but God has called us to bring the largest group of volunteers ever to Southeast Houston. So we're going to do a back-to-back trip. 8 Days of Hope 14 and 8 Days of Hope 15, literally back-to-back. You're going to get a chance to serve with thousands of people from all over the world. We're looking for skilled professionals, people who know how to work with their hands, and maybe they do this for a living. We're also looking for people that are less skilled, but are still looking to be a part of something way bigger than just themselves. You don't have to come for all 2 weeks. You can come for as little as 3 days. We provide the food and lodging, and it's free. Go to 8daysofhope.com for more information. 8daysofhope.com. 8daysofhope.com.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher.
Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome to Free for All Friday. And it's Free for All Friday. You can talk about anything that's been in the news this past week, but I'm particularly interested in your response to what the Republican Party, they just repealed the Tea Party. They stomped on it. They picked it up and threw it to the pavement and stepped on its head. They repealed it. They shredded it. They thrashed it. The Tea Party is now gone. It's completely history. A mere flicker of the memory. So I want to know what you think about that. I'm pretty worked up, as you can tell. Want to know how you feel about this. The one hero in all of this was Rand Paul. I'm going to play some sound bites from him. He was a stud last night. And there were 28 Republican senators that voted against this thing. We're identifying him here. Let's see. Bob Corker, good for him. He was a no vote. John Cornyn from Texas, big fat yay. Tom Cotton from Arkansas, one of the supposedly good guys. He was a big fat yes. Probably justified it on the grounds of funding the military. That's how they always justify these monstrosity budget bills, is funding the military. That's all Lindsey Graham could talk about. Well, you can have a separate standalone bill to fund the military. Don't use this as a paper-thin excuse to stick it to your own constituents. Mike Crapo from my home state of Idaho, good for Mike Crapo, voted no on this thing. Ted Cruz, big fat yes from Ted Cruz on this bill. Steve Daines from Montana, he was a no, good for him. Mike Enzi from Wyoming, he was a no, good for him. Joni Ernst from Iowa, he was a big fat yes. Deb Fischer, embarrassing my wife, was a big fat yes on this. He even spells her name the same way. So I'm going to call Senator Fischer up and say, Senator Fischer, you either change your voting pattern or you change your name. You are embarrassing that good name.
You are calling Her, the princess of Guam now.
The princess, well, Debbie?
Yeah.
My Debbie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Her Royal Majesty of Guam now. So
yes.
maybe
Her Majesty. Yes.
Create a
so
little
we are
separation.
creating a little, yeah, there's a way to distinguish between them. Jeff Flake voted no on this thing. I got no idea why. Corey Gardner from Colorado, big fat yay. Chuck Grassley from Iowa, he was a no. Lindsey Graham, as you might guess, was a big fat yes. Orrin Hatch from Utah, a big fat yes. Let's see, you had Heller from Nevada, big fat yes. Hovind from North Dakota, big fat yes. Jim Inhofe from Oklahoma disappointed me. He was a big fat yes. John Isaacson from Georgia, a big fat yes. Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, good for him. He was a no. Let's see, the Jones guy from Alabama that took Roy Moore's seat, he was a big fat yes. That would have been a no vote if Roy Moore had been elected. If the Republicans had shown any effort to help him, they could have won that. Kennedy from Los Angeles, Bill Kennedy, he was a big fat no. Good for him. Jim Lankford, Oklahoma, he was a no. Good for him. Mike Lee from Utah, as you might expect, he was a no. Good for him. Chris McConnell, Mitch McConnell, big fat yes. Jerry Moran, Kansas, big fat yes. Lisa Murkowski, Arkansas, or Alaska rather, big fat yes. Rand Paul was a principled no. Sonny Perdue, Georgia, big fat yes. Bob Portman, Ohio, big fat yes. Reed from Rhode Island, he's a Democrat, forget him. Jim Risch from Idaho, my home state of Idaho, he was a nay. Good for Jim Risch, solid guy. Roberts from Kansas, big fat yes. Mike Round, South Dakota, big fat yes. Marco Rubio, big fat yes. Ben Sass from Nebraska, good for him. Offset Deb Fisher's vote, he was a big fat no. Tim Scott was a big fat yes from South Carolina. And Sullivan from Arkansas was a big fat yes. Pat Toomey, Pennsylvania, was a no. Good for him. John Thune, South Dakota, big-time establishment guy, was a big fat yes. Tom Tillis, big disappointment, came in with the Tea Party movement. He was a big fat yes. And then Roger Wicker was a, wait a minute, wait, hold it. Now, Roger Wicker was a big fat yes. Misread my notes there for a moment. And Young from Indiana, he was a big fat yes. All right, let's go to the phones. That's the bad news, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's get your reactions. Let's go to Kay in Pensacola, Florida. Kay, welcome. What's on your mind? Kay, are you?
Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing good. What's on your mind?
I think you got the wrong person. I'm Todd in Pensacola, Florida.
Okay, Todd. Sorry about that. My bad. Go ahead.
You were talking about the unlimited spending that our country is doing. Why do we have over 100 military bases all around the world? We don't need to be the world's police. If we closed half of those down, we could probably reduce the deficit quickly.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous that we're trying to be the world's policeman. We're playing war games 50 miles from Russia's border. You know, if they were doing it in Canada or Mexico, we'd be starting World War III over it.
Mm-hmm. You know, and I think
we just don't need to be the world's police.
Yeah, no, and you're exactly right, Todd. And the only guy making that argument yesterday was Rand Paul. He said, look, we do not need to be in Afghanistan, for instance. There's no military objective that's achievable there. We're not going to be able to build a country. You cannot build a functioning democracy in a Muslim nation. Tried that in Iraq. Didn't work. You can't do it. So we're just wasting American money, wasting American lives in Afghanistan as well as a lot of other places. Like you say, Todd, no business being the world's cop because we can't do it. The purpose of the military is not, I repeat, the purpose of the military is not to keep the world safe for democracy. That's not the purpose of the American military. It's not to keep the world safe for democracy. It's to keep the world safe for Americans. That's the purpose of the United States military. Keep the world safe for Americans. You know, and Donald Trump has said, look, it's America first. We only ought to get involved militarily when we have strategic interests that are directly at risk. All right, Todd, I'm with you on that, and we got a lot of money going into the military that we could save if we had a more focused purpose for the military. Let's go to Jeff, Upper Sandusky, Ohio. Jeff, welcome. What's on your mind?
Thanks for taking my call, Brian.
Yes, sir.
I just want to say that I've been a Donald Trump supporter ever since the time he came down that golden escalator. You know, on this one, I have to put the blame on him. He had the final say, and all he had to do was put a big X on that and send it right back to him and tell him to try again and keep the government shut down till they got it right.
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, he's the final stop. He has a veto pen. That's where the accountability is in the executive branch for what the House and the Senate do. If they do things that are bad, the last stop, last port of call is the president's desk, and Donald Trump can and should have vetoed this monstrous piece of legislation. All right, very good point, Jeff. Appreciate that. Be interesting to see how many other of Donald Trump's supporters. I mean, I voted for Donald Trump, and I've liked what he's done for most of the first year, but that one, I can't go with him on that. Let's go to Gene in Mobile, Alabama. Gene, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yes, I called Representative Bradley Byrne yesterday and said, please do not vote for this. I called him back this morning and complained about it. They said very few people had called, but they said General Mattis personally talked to Representative Byrne yesterday and urged him to vote for it. And I said, well, I guess my vote doesn't count then. Wait, because I called and said don't vote for it. So we need to get rid of Bradley Byrne. He's having a town hall meeting in the Mobile area February 22nd. I want everybody in Mobile to turn out for it.
Well, you know, and this is the standard excuse that Republicans use that want to vote for this thing. Republicans, one of the marks of the Republican Party, strong support for strong military. That's good. That's fine. Our military needs to be as strong as it needs to be. We need to be able to pulverize our enemies. We need to have a big enough, strong enough military that we can completely, absolutely pummel and neutralize anybody that wants to take us on. We have to have such an intimidating military that nobody would even think about taking the first swing at us. We need that, and Republicans are for that. But that's how these Republicans justify voting for these monstrous budgets, is hiding behind the skirts of the military. It's a cowardly way to do it. If they don't want to vote for these bloated budgets, then separate out the military budget. That's what they're supposed to do anyway. That's supposed to be a whole separate appropriations process. Separate out the military budget and beef it up. And then when you get to social spending, separate that out, separate appropriations bill, and stop hiding behind the skirts of the military. It's just cowardly and weak. All right. Appreciate the call, Gene. Let's go to Clark in Ashburn, Georgia. Clark, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Man, I appreciate you very much, man. It's good to hear somebody on there telling the truth.
All right.
You sure can't turn on TV in here, and I'll promise you that. Hey, y'all got to watch out for the Republicans, man. That's what y'all seeing in action up there. Those guys pretty much, they really don't want to be in power. They want the people they want to sit up there, collect the money, just do what they want to do. And, you know, what my biggest beef is right now, we have the majority in the Senate and in the House, but we can't stand it. So we're going to sit back, we're going to do stupid stuff, and we're going to lose it for what we're going to do. When the election time comes up on this year right here, we're going to wind up losing these House seats or the Senate seats, and we're not going to be able to do anything. And then we're going to be back in gridlock. I said, well, we can't do anything because, we can't do it. We don't have the votes.
Well, and I'll tell you, Clark, you make a very good point. This is the first moment, ladies and gentlemen, that I have had any concerns about what's going to happen next November. The Republicans were in the driver's seat. The polls were shifting their directions. The tax cuts were kicking in. We were cooking. And now they've lost all that momentum, and I believe given the advantage to the Democrats. Let's go to Jamie, Oklahoma City. Jamie, I got 15 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
All right, thank you for taking my call. Basically, Gainor was always making excuses. But I think this bill is trying to prepare the way for the immigrants with the big welfare money, and then the money is already there.
All right, Jamie, listen, I appreciate it. I think you make a real good point. The Dreamers weren't in this. That's going to come up later, but the Republicans are going to do the same thing all over again, vote a monstrous DACA budget. Back after the news.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
As a federal or state employee, you have the opportunity to support the American Family Association through the combined federal campaign. By designating a monthly payroll deduction using 12037, you help AFA continue to fight for your family. So when you complete your CFC form, remember, AFA's number is 12037. And thank you for your help.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio, a ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Steve Pugh. President Donald Trump is making the case on Twitter for electing more Republicans to Congress after signing a $400 billion spending plan. He says non-military spending will never come down without electing more Republicans in the 2018 elections. Meanwhile, Dan Celia of Financial Issues is happy to see a 2-year budget deal, but he says it remains to be seen whether we actually see a 2-year budget deal.
Let me just explain something to you so you're not caught off guard here. So this budget deal only goes till March 23rd. It's a 2-year deal, but unfortunately, lawmakers have about 6 weeks to write the detailed legislation that is going to fund all these new levels. And yes, when they write that detailed piece of legislation, it has to be voted on.
More details on the budget plan at onenewsnow.com. A public policy analyst does not believe the Democrats' counter FISA memo will definitively refute the original FISA memo regarding the former Obama administration's use of the FBI to spy on political opponents.
The ball is now in President Trump's court after the House Intelligence Committee voted to allow the release of the counter memo, which Democrat members of the committee claim will rebut Republican assertions that the FBI and the Justice Department had abused their powers to wiretap former Trump campaign staffer Carter Page. The president has until February 10th to decide whether he wants to try to block its release. Abraham Hamilton III is general counsel and public policy analyst for the American Family Association.
I do think it's important to release the Democrat memo. What I expect is that there won't be any refuting the factual assertions concerning the FISA warrant process that was abused. What I expect is there to be some information that will attempt to shade or to explain away some of the additional conduct.
But Hamilton says that would bring a particular question.
If they are not attempting to refute the abuses of the FISA warrant process, is that not a tacit admission that the FBI and our Department of Justice have been co-opted by a political party to demonize and spy on with the full weight, scope, and resources of the federal government one's political opponents?
I'm Chad Groening.
The island nation of Bermuda is bucking the international trend and walking back gay marriage. More from Steve Jordahl.
Gay activists in Bermuda have been pressing hard for the right to same-sex marriage, but were unable to convince voters or the legislature. So like in the U.S., if they can't legalize their nuptials legitimately, they get a court to force it on Bermudans. That happened last May, and Pastor Paul Heffernan of Evangelical Church of Bermuda says since then activists have been trying to shame those with a biblical view of marriage out of the conversation.
The accusations of bigotry and hatred against those who hold these traditional religious values has been quite hurtful toward the church, and I think because of that, many have said we're not going to speak out anymore in regard to this.
But Bermudans are a conservative lot, and unlike in the U.S., they pushed back hard.
There was a non-binding referendum that took place in regard to whether or not the population in general would be in favor of either A, same-sex marriage, or B, civil unions. And the vast majority of people that took part in that poll said that they were not in favor of either of those options.
Taking the will of the people into consideration, the legislature has passed a compromise. Same-sex couples can have domestic partnerships, which allow them common courtesies like hospital visits, tax breaks, and inheritance rights. But it's no longer marriage. Like all compromises, neither side is very happy. Meanwhile, Pastor Heffernan wants to see the hatred and bigotry people of faith in Bermuda have endured stop. I'm Steve Jordahl.
American Family News is available online at onenewsnow.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download the One News Now mobile app. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Women and men alike find themselves in despair after an abortion. Every woman who had an abortion was for a short time a mother, every man a father. But afterwards, they're all people in pain, anger, sadness, relationship problems. These often accompany an abortion. But there is hope. Call 866-482-LIFE. Your call is confidential, and you'll be talking with someone who has already been where you are and found the way out. 866-482-LIFE.
We cannot continue to spend this way. We have a debt that's bigger than our economy.
If you were against President Obama's deficits and now you're for the Republican deficits, isn't that the very definition of hypocrisy?
What happened? Where are the conservatives we thought we were electing?
The dirty little secret is that by and large, both parties don't care about the debt. I want people to feel uncomfortable. The spending bill's 700 pages, and there will be no amendments. And they're like, but it's Thursday, and we like to be on vacation on Fridays.
There have to be some conservatives left. What happened to the idea of being a fiscal conservative? Where are they?
Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. An informed patriot is what we want.
Welcome to American Family Radio's Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on conservative talk radio.
Muscular Christianity.
Where we relentlessly explore the intersection of truth and politics.
The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant. It's just that they know so much that isn't so.
Now, here's your host, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to this Free-for-All Friday edition of Focal Point on American Family Radio. And the swamp has swamped the fiscal conservatives. The swamp has swamped the Tea Party. Now at the bottom of the bay, bottom of the Potomac in Washington, D.C., monstrous budget bill voted on yesterday by the Republicans, repealing, shredding, stomping on the Tea Party, and plunging America into more unconscionable debt. Now, the one guy I mentioned that really stood tall and strong yesterday was Rand Paul. He began the day yesterday afternoon by being on Neil Cavuto's show, clip number 1. And here is Rand Paul talking about how he sees things going into the vote last night.
We have to do more. There have to be some conservatives left. What happened to the idea of being a fiscal conservative? Where are they? Have we all just, given up on it because Republicans are in charge? We promised the people who gave us money and voted for us that we were going to be the adults, that we're going to try to spend less money and balance budgets, and then those people put us in charge, and I hear from them all the time, what happened? Where are the conservatives we thought we were electing?
It sounds like you're angry at Mitch McConnell.
The system, and it's not just one person. It really is about the system. But if I were to call the system a person, I'd call it the establishment. And it's a whole lot of people who really cannot have enough vision to understand that we cannot continue to spend this way. We have a debt that's bigger than our economy. We have a lot of good stuff. The tax cut's great, and I think it's going to really stimulate the economy. But I truly believe the markets are jittery because they're worried about the long-term imbalance between what comes in and what goes out for the federal government.
I think Rand Paul at one point said, look, all you got to do, and this is a true fact, I've talked about this for years, all you got to do is cut federal spending by 1%. 1%. Do that every year for 6 years, and the budget will balance. In other words, you cut the 2018 budget by 1% for 2019. You take that budget in 2019, you cut that budget by 1%. The next year, you cut that budget by 1%. The budget will balance in 6 years. We don't have a revenue problem, ladies and gentlemen. We have a spending problem big time. Now, here's Rand Paul as part of his speech last night on the Senate floor, clip number 2, and he points his finger right at his colleagues on his side of the aisle.
I want people to feel uncomfortable. I want them to have to answer people at home who said, how come you were against President Obama's deficits, and then how come you're for Republican deficits? Isn't that the very definition of intellectual dishonesty? If you were against President Obama's deficits and now you're for the Republican deficits, isn't that the very definition of hypocrisy?
Hard to argue with that. You know, they hated deficits when Obama was ringing them up. This deficit in this one is going to be $1 trillion next year. Remember when we talked about Obama running $1 trillion deficits and how horrible that was and how irresponsible that was? Well, this is what this budget is going to run. It's going to run $1 trillion deficit. And Rand Paul says, you celebrate this, you're proud of this, you're patting yourself on the back. That is just rank hypocrisy, and there's a stench about that. All right, let's go to clip number 3. This is Rand Paul with a good observation.
When the Democrats are in power, Republicans appear to be the conservative party. But when Republicans are in power, it seems there is no conservative party. You see, opposition seems to bring people together, and they know what they're not for, but then they get in power and they decide, we're just going to spend that money too. We're going to send that money to our friends this time. The hypocrisy hangs in the air and chokes anyone with a sense of decency or intellectual honesty.
All right, Rand Paul standing tall last night. Here is what he says, clip number 4.
The dirty little secret is that by and large, both parties don't care about the debt. The spending bill is 700 pages, and there will be no amendments. The debate, although it's somewhat inside baseball that we're having here, is over me having a 15-minute debate. And they say, woe is me, if you get one, everybody will want an amendment. Well, guess that would be called debate. That would be called an open process. That would be called concern for your country, enough to take a few minutes. And they're like, but it's Thursday, and we like to be on vacation on Fridays. And so they clamor, but we've been sitting around all day. It's not like we've had 100 amendments today and we're all worn out. We can't do one more. We're going to have 0 amendments. 0, goose egg, no amendments.
And what he's talking about there is they were scheduled to wrap that whole thing up by midnight, but it took unanimous consent to get there by midnight. Rand Paul says, I'm not going to consent to this thing. And so I want a 15-minute speech in order to explain my point of view. And that threw the whole thing past midnight because they couldn't take a vote until after midnight. So they were upset with Rand Paul for bumping into their 3-day weekend. As Rand Paul, clip number 5.
It's a binary choice. They love that word. It's a binary choice. Take it or leave it. You know what? I'm going to leave it. I didn't come up here for this. I didn't leave my family throughout the week and travel up here to be a part of something that is so much inertia and so much status quo that they're not leading the country. They're just following along, and it's a big ball rolling down the hill, grabbing up your dollars as the boulder rolls down the hill, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it's going to crush us. But nobody's got the guts to stand up and say no.
No, they all put on their skirts, hid behind the military, and voted yes on this deficit-busting budget. Here's a Rand Paul clip number 6.
Over the past 40 years, only 4 times have we actually done 12 individual Department of Government appropriation bills. You've heard of like the Appropriation Committee. This is where the spending is. So you have like the Department of Defense, the Department of Commerce, Health and Human Services. We're supposed to pass each individual bill, and what would happen when we passed the bills, they would go through committee, and each committee would look and see, well, this spending seems to be working, we're getting a great result, and we want some more next year. And this spending appears to have been put in a closet and lit on fire, and so next year we're not giving that person who put the $10 million in the closet and lit it on fire, we're not going to give them any money. But guess what? That doesn't happen. So people keep putting your money in a closet and lighting it on fire.
That's Rand Paul. You know, and again, as the Department of Defense, it's one of the individual budgets that they're supposed to deal with individually. So you can pack as much money into that defense appropriations bill as you want, but they hide behind that to stuff the other parts of the budget with lard. That's clip number 7.
And what I would ask my colleagues, as well as those across the country, what do you want from government? Do you want some physical item? Is government here so someone can get you something and give you some physical item, a cell phone or a car? Is that what government's for? Or is government here to preserve your liberty? See, most of us, or most, I would say some of us, believe that your rights are from God, that they pre-exist government, and that really government's job is not to get you stuff. Government's job is not to get somebody else's stuff for you. Government's job is to preserve your liberty, to preserve your natural God-given rights. And in doing that, you may acquire through your liberty and through your hard work, you may acquire stuff, and the government helps to prevent your neighbor from stealing it, but your government shouldn't be the one stealing it from your neighbor and giving it to you.
That's exactly right. And see, that's what we have going on right now. That's what welfare is. That's what the welfare program is. The food stamp program, subsidized housing, all of those welfare programs is the government stealing from one American to give it to another American. It's just legalized plunder, legalized theft. Back with Dan Gainor. Stay with us.
Here's Twyla Brace, president of CCHF, with today's Health Freedom Minute.
When you go to the doctor, treatment decisions may not be based on your needs or your doctor's best judgment. In the world of government programs, health plans, computerized treatment protocols, and electronic health record tracking systems, outsiders often make the rules. Your private medical data is being used against your doctor if your doctor doesn't comply with certain practices. Your data is used to see how many doctors have prescribed low-value tests or treatment. Doctors who give so-called low-value care will be penalized. Who defines low value? Not you, but you may experience the pain of the decision. This is why you and your doctor should have a private contract, not an insurance contract.
Learn more about protecting your healthcare choices. Sign up for the CCHF Weekly E-News Update at cchfreedom.org. That's cchfreedom.org.
Here's some great news. If you missed the deadline to sign up for health insurance, or more importantly, if you signed up for a plan that you're just not happy with, you still have a choice. It's called MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing program that's been around for 25 years, and they have hundreds of thousands of members all across the country. And get this, over the years, MediShare members have shared more than $1 billion of each other's medical bills. Best of all, you could save a lot of money with MediShare. The typical savings for a family is about $500 a month. Your savings could be more or less, but think about what you could do with that extra money. Think you're stuck with a high-cost health plan that doesn't have a lot to offer? Well, think again. You can join MediShare anytime, so call them today and check it out. Here's the number to find out more, and there's no pressure. They're super easy to talk to. 855-PSALM-23. That's 855-PSALM-23. 855-PSALM-23.
This is Focal Point with Brian Fisher on American Family Radio.
Hi, and welcome back to Free for All Friday on Focal Point. You're listening to Focal Point, the home of muscular Christianity on Conservative Talk Radio, and I am Brian Fisher, your congenial, convivial, and amiable host. Pleased, as customarily we do on Friday, to invite to our decision maker line Dan Gainor, who is the Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. Dan, welcome back to Focal Point.
It's a pleasure to be back. There's always so much going on.
Boy, there sure is. Well, where do you want to start today, Dan? What's on the front of your mind to talk about?
Well, I mean, one of the things I noticed was the disparity of messages we get in culture. This week, obviously, with the Super Bowl, we had some great examples of people who are willing to declare their faith. The Philadelphia Eagles, credit to Nick Foles and others on the team, the coach, they came out very publicly and said, that they were Christian, they were thanking God. Tony Dungy had said that he thought that the team would do well because of their Christian faith. He got criticized for it. I saw several outlets criticizing Foles and the coach and the team. It's astonishing that's where we are in the culture on one side, and then you realize why. And so, of course, you flip the script and go to Hollywood and look at the TV show The Mick. And now The Mick is, definitely one of those despicable shows that you wonder, what people were thinking about when they approved it. And this week, of course, the Mick goes after people who believe in God. So it's smart and progressive to not believe in God. That's the Mick's take on things.
So that's what's going to get the plaudits, and that's what's going to get the kudos. from people that produce Hollywood entertainment. Well, let's go back to this Dungy thing just for a moment here, because you like you pointed out, Dan, you had some very open and public critics. There was a guy by the name of Kyle Koster. He writes for something called the Big Lead blog, and he was one of the ones that went after Tony Dungy real hard and real heavy. And he said this: Dungy expressing his beliefs on his personal time and platform is one thing. Even if I disagree with him, I appreciate his candor and willingness to. But when his beliefs seep into his analyst role, either unintentionally or otherwise, they should be checked both by NBC and the public. And he goes on to say, look, if he's going to bring his agenda into his analysis and bring it on the set, he just should not do that. We don't want Tom Brady talking about his revolutionary diet, a vegan diet, or an outspoken atheist crediting Arian Foster's worldview. We don't want that, so we shouldn't have to put up with Tony Dungy talking about his Christian faith. But the thing that struck me, Dan, so hypocritical about this, and I don't know where this particular guy was, this Kyle Koster was, when it came to the whole protests against the anthem and the flag. When you have these same athletes, I mean, they're bringing their own political views right onto the sidelines and making a very public and open display of their attitude toward the flag and toward the national anthem. And these same people, these liberal critics, they can't get enough of that. They think that's courage. They think that's terrific. They think that's great. When I would say the guy that's showing the real courage is Tony Dungy, because he knows he's going to get some blowback for this.
Yeah, there's no courage at all involved when you stand up with the crowd. When you're that guy who stands up against the crowd stands up and you stay seated. That's when it takes courage. When you're doing opposite of what everybody wants you to do. Well, the current culture, the media culture in this country, is anti-Christian. As anti-Christian as ever been in this country's history. Doesn't make it as bad as the Mideast. There'll be people who listen to the show like, oh, you're saying, no, we're saying it's worse than it's ever been. And for people who grew up in a Christian America, which we've been since our founding, that's alarming. And when you look around and see the way Christians are discriminated against or genocide in other parts of the world, you get concerned. And so the left believes in intersectionality, where you have this idea that every left-wing belief is tied into every left-wing belief. If you support Black Lives Matter, you must be pro-transgender bathrooms. You must all of this ties together, and you must wear your heart on your sleeve and be public everywhere. And if someone doesn't agree to one, they're going to be ostracized, they're going to lose their job, etc. So basically, what they've decided is there's only one approved set of beliefs. It's exactly like the old Soviet Union, East Germany, Cuba, Venezuela. There's a state set of beliefs. You either have it or you don't. And if you don't have it, we're going to target you. It has nothing to do with, we don't want any of this. Of course they do. They want tons of it. They want every bit of belief system in the world out there as long as they agree with it.
And kind of the disconnect in their own minds, Dan, or their seeming inability to put two and two together on this. Even Kyle Koster said, look, we don't want to talk about, you shouldn't ever discuss religion and politics. That was a part of his rebuke of Tony Dungy. We're not supposed to talk about religion and politics, but that's what these sideline protesters are doing every week. We can't get enough of it. They talk about it at press conferences. They're asked about it. They talk about it freely. NFL has even taken their side. NFL's given them $90 million to promote their political point of view. Now imagine if they'd done the same thing with Tony Dungy. We want to support Tony Dungy. That takes real courage to do what he did. And we're going to give $90 million to Tony Dungy's favorite ministry to show our support. I mean, we'd never hear the end of that. But they don't seem to be able to recognize the glaring inconsistency and hypocrisy of their double standard.
Well, yeah, liberals constantly say you have to leave your beliefs at the voting booth. You can't vote your beliefs. You got to leave them in church. You don't bring them into the voting booth. Don't bring them into politics. They don't want politicians voting on their beliefs. Well, then what are you voting on? I mean, you get elected. You're a good Christian man or woman. You get elected to office. You're getting elected as who you are. That's your belief system. People voted you in based on that. And so what they're saying is only a secular belief system is approved. So their belief system is okay. Your belief system is not. Well, I mean, that path leads to tyranny, and it's not a very long path.
You know, and you're right about that, Dan. That's something that we've seen in our culture. We've seen this kind of noose kind of tightening. I mean, we're getting now these speech laws on campuses where if you use the wrong phrase, the wrong word, you can trigger students on the campus, these delicate little snowflakes, and you can get bounced out of campus. You can get bounced out of the major that you're pursuing, which you may be pursuing because you hope it will lead to a career. So your entire career is endangered because you don't have the politically correct campus view of whether it's relationship between the genders, whether it's a view of marriage, whether it's a view of what constitutes normative sexuality. If you don't have the state-sponsored view, the official correct view, the totalitarian view, then you can get in really big trouble. And people, I don't think, realize just how tight the noose is getting around the neck of people who are free thinkers and believe in free speech.
Yeah, well, the left has thoroughly embraced the college mindset, the idea that you need a safe space to protect you from offensive speech, unless, of course, your speech is state approved. So if you go to a state college and you want transgender bathrooms, that's a state approved speech. If you disagree, that's offensive and you're going to trigger someone. And it just goes down the line. You support Black Lives Matter. You support the kneelers in football. If you don't, well, that's offensive, and we need to be protected from that. What they're doing is indoctrinating. They stopped teaching some time ago, and the escalation of this stuff has gone from being on college campuses into the rest of society. Because what we've had is years and years of grade schools, high schools, and colleges teaching this garbage to our young people. Well, now they've graduated. They've come out into the real world, and used to be the real world had no tolerance for this garbage. And now they're saying, well, we're used to being protected from this. How dare you wear a shirt walking down the street that's got an American flag? I look at the State of the Union. You had a congressman who walked out when they started chanting USA.
You know, we were talking, Dan, about the expressions of faith at the Super Bowl, and it's not directly connected to the Super Bowl, but MRC, I noticed this week that there is a rapper by the name of Chance. He's called Chance the Rapper. I wasn't familiar with him. I'm not a big rap music fan, although I can rap with the best of them. You can ask my wife about that. But not a big fan of rap music. But anyway, this guy named Chance the Rapper, and it turns out he's got some Christian faith to him.
Yeah, Chance, he won a Grammy. He actually talks about, I think, when he won the Grammys, when he did one of the Grammys. He's a big name. Like you, I am not a rap fan. I don't think anyone who knows me will be shocked by that. But I respect anybody in any field who's good at what they do. They're popular, and because they're influencers. And so here he goes on CBS this morning, just a couple days ago, and what he's talking about is his love of faith. And so he said, here's a quote, and it's a quote you used to see in culture commonly, and you don't anymore. And he says, I love Jesus, and I'm cool with saying that. Think about all of the celebrities in Hollywood, all the big names out there, and how rarely you see a quote like that now. And so, whether I like his music or not, I'm a fan because I think he has a good heart.
Yeah. Well, Dan, appreciate you bringing us up to speed. Particularly enjoyed our exchange about what's going on in our culture. I think most of the people in our listening audience can kind of agree with that, and we see just how the left has kind of taken over so much of the media and just dominating it. And you pointed out, this is a very profound observation, that they've stopped trying to instruct and stopped trying to teach, and now they've just gone straight to propagandizing and brainwashing.
Yeah, it's a dark time, and we can't let it get darker.
Guest has been Dan Gainor. He's the Vice President for Business and Culture at the Media Research Center. Dan, as always, enlightening, instructive, and a pleasure to talk with you. I hope you just have an absolutely terrific weekend, and our best to all your buddies there and colleagues at the Media Research Center. Newsbusters is the place to go. You want to see what they do, newsbusters.org. Thanks again, Dan. Have a terrific weekend.
Thanks. God bless.
God bless you, too. All right, Dan Gainor, good friend of this program with the Media Research Center. Brent Bozell is the big boss there. All right, when we come back, we have a little more content. We want to do a little bit of exploration of what's going on with this whole memo controversy and the Russian deal and all that kind of stuff. We've got a little bit of information to pass along to you, and it is Free for All Friday, so at the end of the hour, we'll take your calls on anything you want to talk about. Focal Point, American Family Radio.
Hi, this is Jim Stanley, and we're partnering with the Ministry of Preborn to help save babies' lives through ultrasound. Here's how a nurse describes the power of an ultrasound.
Last week, just one example of a mom who came in was very abortion-minded, and when she saw the picture of her baby on ultrasound and heard that beating heart, it was a defining moment that just broke her, and she said, I just can't allow this baby to be killed.
By letting a mother hear her baby's heartbeat and see her baby in the womb, she will choose life 80% of the time.
I cannot tell you how many times a baby's life is saved through ultrasound. It's just an incredible tool.
Underwrite a free ultrasound and help save a baby's life. Go to preborn.com. That's preborn.com. Or dial pound 250 and say keyword baby. All gifts are tax deductible. Your love can save a life.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I had a lot of credit card debt and I couldn't pay my bills. I was feeling so bad. I got to a point where I needed some help. So I reached out and contacted Trinity.
If you're in debt and you need help, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813 to talk to a certified counselor.
They were able to take all of my different payments and put them all together.
Trinity will consolidate your accounts into one easy-to-manage monthly payment, put a stop to late fees and over-limit charges, reduce your interest, and possibly improve your credit score. You'll save thousands.
And they were actually able to work with my creditors. I've been able to pay off close to $15,000 in the last 18 months.
If your debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
My name is Stephanie, and I'm debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Video segments of today's program will be posted at afr.net and on the Focal Point Facebook page. You'll also find the best collection of Brian's resources on our Facebook page. If you're on Twitter, be among the very first every morning to find out what the day's show will be about. Just follow Brian at Brian J. Fisher.
Brian J. Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to Free for All Friday on American Family Radio. Donald Trump drawing some heat for saying some positive things about Rob Porter. This is a guy who resigned earlier this week, accused of physical, verbal, and emotional abuse of not just one, but two ex-wives. And he tried to be as complimentary as he could, and is getting some criticism for sticking up for a guy that had that kind of marital history. We certainly wish him well. He did a very good job. We hope he has a wonderful career. It was sad when we heard about it, and certainly he's also very sad now. He also, as you probably know, says he's innocent, and I think you have to remember that. So anyway, for whatever that's worth, Trump drawing some fire over that. Now let's, I want to play one more soundbite. This is Lindsey Graham. It's R1. We had all these sound bites from Rand Paul. We can't spend ourselves into oblivion. They keep telling us it's a binary choice. You got to take it or leave it. Well, I'm going to leave it. I didn't come up here to put up with this kind of nonsense. We need to get some kind of control, some kind of sanity in the budget. We're supposed to have 12 different appropriations bills instead of one big giant conglomerate mess. And we could separate out defense appropriation spending, and we could give the military as much as we felt they ought to have, and then take the other 11 budgets and appropriations bills and figure out what we need to carve them down to size and cut out waste and spending that we really don't need to put into the program. But we're not doing that. Everything now is just one big giant omnibus bill. Now, Rand Paul is one guy out there, the only guy arguing yesterday for some kind of sanity when it comes to budget and government spending. And here's what Lindsey Graham had to say about that. Clip R1.
And to Senator Paul, the deficit is a problem. The debt is a problem. Entitlement reform is necessary, and I applaud you for being courageous enough to talk about delaying retirement and means testing benefits. But on national security, you have been wrong at every turn. You do not understand what our military has been facing since 2011. There are planes that can't fly, there are soldiers that can't deploy, there are families that have to miss their family members way too much because we don't have enough people in the Army, the Navy, Air Force, and the Marine Corps, and we're about to finish that. So he can play his little games, but when the sun comes up tomorrow, the military is going to be flush with cash, and God bless those who are doing the fighting.
In fact, one of the things he did is had a big attaboy to Donald Trump for sticking up for the boys in uniform. And again, what Lindsey Graham is doing is just getting in his skirt and hiding behind the military as his excuse for bloating spending in areas that have nothing to do with the military. You know, and part of what he's talking about here, maybe we wouldn't need quite so many members of the military if we had a more focused mission for our military, if the military was focused on keeping the world safe for Americans instead of keeping the world safe for democracy. Now, let's turn our attention to the latest with the memo scandal. One of the things that's going on there, and we talked about this yesterday, is this whistleblower, a guy by the name of Doug Campbell. He's a businessman that was a whistleblower, was kind of a confidential informer for the FBI and the CIA on what the Russians were up to. And he's the one that came back to them and said, look, what they're doing is they are planning to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars, $3 million a year, on lobbying the American government to try to get favorable help from Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State. They're going to give a whole boatload of money to Bill Clinton, and they did, $600,000 for one 20-minute speech. And they put, between the whole conglomerate that was working on buying our uranium deposit, they put $145 million into the Clinton Foundation in order to curry favor. By the way, it turns out that Mark Warner, who's a big-time guy in the Foreign Intelligence Committee, he's been caught texting with a lobbyist for a Russian oligarch who has ties to Hillary Clinton. Now, remember how freaked out everybody got when Donald Trump Jr. was meeting at Trump Tower with Russian oligarch types. Russian people connected to the Russian government. They freaked out. It's treasonous. He's betraying our country. Well, here's Mark Warner doing exactly the same thing, even texted about avoiding a paper trail, meeting with a lobbyist by the name of Adam Waldman in London. He was trying to hook up with Christopher Steele of the phony dossier and using Adam Waldman as the go-between, texting about not leaving a paper trail. What are you trying to hide, Mark Warner, from everybody? Peter Strzok, one of the guys that was texting with Lisa Page, they found some texts from him to Lisa Page saying, look, there are material misrepresentations in this FISA application. This was a FISA application from October 16, 2015, not the one that we're concerned about, not the FISA application to spy on the Trump team, but another FISA application. And he said, look, there were material representations made on this FISA application. You know, it's an interesting thing to me that they, you know, we look at how sloppy the resourcing was for this FISA application for spying on the Trump team. And then you wonder, is that court just in general pretty sloppy? You know, Andrew Napolitano said, look, if I'm a judge and you're going to want to break somebody's door down at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. There's going to be a lot of give and take, give and take, give and take. I'm going to have to be convinced after probing you pretty thoroughly that this is a justified warrant. And he says, look, there's a problem. If the court just blithely accepts whatever the government gives, then it becomes as much the court's fault as it is the government's fault. You know, here you got a FISA court. It grants 99.9% of all the warrants requested. Now you could take it, well, the FBI is just doing its homework. It could be that, or it could be that the FISA court is sloppy and they're letting stuff slip by that they shouldn't. And that's what happened to Napolitano. He's saying, look, 99.9%, that is an unbelievable number. I've never heard a number that high in terms of granting warrants. And you're talking about FISA warrant, you're talking about surveillance. These are pretty heavy-duty warrants here. And that may be an indication, he says, that the FISA court is getting lazy and sloppy, and the FBI knows that. They're going to walk in there and say, look, we're going to get this thing we always do, so we don't have to do our homework before we walk in there. So let's play clip number 8. This is Victoria Tenzing. Her client is this Doug Campbell guy. He's the one that reported to the CIA and the FBI that the Russians are spending $3 million a year trying to curry favor with Hillary Clinton and the State Department. And Victoria Tenzing is representing him. Here's what she had to say, clip 8.
My client, Doug Campbell, was so credible. I mean, he came out because he thought he was dying from cancer, and he wanted his story to be told. And he started this over a year ago I wasn't involved. So they can go attack all they want to. He's got the truth. He's got briefings. The FBI has all kinds of videotapes. This really started, and you need to know this, in 2005, when Bill Clinton went to Kazakhstan with his multi-gazillionaire friend, Frank Justra. And they wined and dined the corrupt dictator of Kazakhstan, and lo and behold, the next morning, they come away with uranium-1 mining contracts. And that's when the Russians started planning it. Hillary Clinton was senator at the time, and when she became Secretary of State in 2009, the Russians thought they died and gone to heaven, and that's when they started planning this uranium-1 purchase.
All right, so there's a history there with Hillary Clinton. You know, it's also possible that the FISA court has become pretty heavily politicized. I mean, realize now for 8 years, this was the FISA court that was taking warrants from the warrant requests from the Obama administration, and they were granting 99.9% of the surveillance requests that were coming from the Obama administration, from Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch and those folks. Well, you got to know, I will bet every dollar I've got, which is not a big risk, that 99.9% of the FISA warrant requests that came from the Obama administration were not pure as the driven snow. So it's entirely possible the FISA court, the judges that sit on it, that they too have become politicized. Here is a second Victoria Tenzing clip, clip number 9.
What people really ought to be looking at is, why was this CFIUS decision made? On its face, it's not a good decision. But when you consider the fact that Bill Clinton got $500,000 4 months before the decision was made, and the Clinton Foundation got $145 million from the people who gained when their stock rose after the uranium-1 purchase went through, I think it takes some looking into, don't you?
Yeah, takes some looking into. $145 million for the Clinton Foundation, $600,000 for a Bill Clinton speech. Now, he's a pretty good speech giver, but there's no way that he's got something to say in 20 minutes that's worth $600,000. So that's obviously designed to kind of grease his palms. So, you know, and with this FISA business, you know, there were a lot of lapses in the Christopher Steele memo and how the FBI team handled that. When the FBI learned that Christopher Steele had misrepresented things and lied about talking to the media, the FBI never disclosed that to the FISA court. They just kept going back for renewals of the surveillance warrant and didn't say to the court, look, things have changed. Our client, or our main guy here, this Christopher Steele, he has been lying to us, so we no longer think he is reliable. He lied to us, and he spoke to the media. He leaked stuff to the media, which we told him you cannot do, so we don't find him to be a reliable guy, any longer, and you ought to take that into consideration in your FISA decision. They never went back to him with all that. Anyway, it's a free-for-all Friday. Talk about anything that you want to talk about that's been in the news over the course of this past week. One of the things I want to mention before we go to the phone call section is, you know, Donald Trump and everybody that wants to get money for infrastructure, they all talk about how our roads and bridges are crumbling. You hear that phrase over and over again. Our roads and bridges are crumbling. It turns out that that is a myth, that our nation's major infrastructure, the most vital assets that we have, bridges and roads, is in satisfactory condition. The number of and share of bridges deemed structurally deficient in need of elevated maintenance is now just 9% of the total. 93% of our roads are in fair or better condition. Focal Point American Family Radio, back with your calls. Be right back.
This is Steve Conover inviting you to listen to the Friends of Israel Today each week on this station. Here's our host and Bible teacher, Chris Katulka.
Hey everybody, the Friends of Israel Today is a unique radio show that teaches biblical truth for changing times. We do this through Q&A, timely interviews, dramatic readings from the life of Holocaust survivor Zvi Kalisher, and of course, Bible teaching.
To learn more, visit foiradio.org.
Join us for Friends of Israel Today, Sunday morning at 11:30 Central on American Family Radio.
Announcing 3 new episodes of Ryan DeFrady's Secret Agent. These animated half-hour episodes will entertain children.
That's right.
And teach lessons about joy, patience, and the dangers of selfishness. Ryan DeFrady's is a secret agent with a whole lot to learn, and he insists on working alone until he's paired with a very unlikely partner.
Mommy!
Ryan DeFrady's Secret Agent, episodes 4, 5, and 6 from American Family Studios are available now at afastore.net.
If you like trips where you have to plan everything, then maybe our tour is not for you. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim Wildman with American Family Association and American Family Radio. Of course, I'm talking about our spiritual heritage tours of Washington, D.C., Mount Vernon, and then a separate trip to Williamsburg, Virginia. And guess what? We take care of everything. All you have to do is, as they say, show up. But we take these spiritual heritage tours twice a year, once in June and once in September. Stephen McDowell of the Providence Foundation, who is a historian, will be joining us for both tours, and he will tell you everything you need to know about the places, the times, the events that we will experience on these tours of Washington, D.C. and Williamsburg. For all the information, just go to the website spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com for everything.
American Family Radio. You're listening to Focal Point with Brian Fisher. Focal Point, Brian Fisher.
Hi, and welcome back to the last segment of Focal Point for the week. Free for all Friday. Number to call 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840 is the number to call. It's free for all Friday. Talk about anything that's been in the news over the course of this past week. One more soundbite I want to play for you. We talked last week about Bernd Strider. This was Hillary Clinton's faith guru. He was her liaison to the faith community. The guy's liberal, was Methodist Church, very liberal, and he was a sexual harasser. Harassed more than one staff member on the Hillary Clinton team. Now, Hillary Clinton got complaints about him, and she overruled her chief of staff and says, no, I don't want you to fire him. I want to keep him right where he's at. And after she insisted that they keep him, he was guilty of another instance of sexual harassment. Now, Patty Solis Doyle was her chief of staff at that time. She was interviewed here by Brianna Kaler on CNN, and I want you to listen to their exchange about Hillary Clinton and this Bernd Strider, who was guilty of sexual harassment. Instead of doing anything with the guy that was harassing, they reassigned the women. Sometimes booted them completely off the team to deal with the problem. Let's listen to 14.
So a young woman made a complaint to our head of operations about sexual harassment against Bernd Strider.
Jess O'Connell.
Yes, Jess O'Connell, who's now the CEO of the DNC, against Bernd Strider, who she reported to. The incident was brought to my attention, and, I did my due diligence. I interviewed all the parties involved. I looked at the evidence. I looked at some emails that he had sent. I had looked at other documents, and came to the conclusion that there was sexual harassment involved, that the young woman was very credible, and my recommendation to the senator was to fire her. And I was overruled.
You weren't the only one who recommended it, who believed this was the right avenue to take?
Correct. Well, there were a few people involved in the investigation, so to speak, but the people involved in it believed that he should not be working in our campaign.
So she overruled you personally?
I was overruled, yes.
So Hillary Clinton personally overruled the campaign manager who wanted Burns Strider fired for sexual harassment, and Hillary Clinton again protected the guy who was a sexual predator. Did it with her husband, apparently just got used to doing it, became her kind of standard play in these circumstances. So Hillary Clinton, again, out there protecting rather than exposing serial sexual harassers. All right, let's go to the phones. Let's grab Janet, a call from Janet in Texas. Janet, welcome. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes. On the first hour of your program, you said something about you gave the list of people that had voted yes to that bill.
Yes.
Did you say that Ted Cruz voted yes?
He voted for it. Yes, he did.
He did?
He did. He voted for it, and so did John Cornyn.
Okay. You know what? I'm so disgusted. I'm very disgusted. And I think I'm speaking for millions. I mean, that is just ridiculous. Anyway, thank you, Brian.
All right, you were sure welcome. Sorry
to keep praying, and we just need to contact them and let them know, why did you do this?
Yeah.
They funded Planned Parenthood again, didn't they?
Yes, and I think it would be good to let them know, to complain about both of that, to call them and let them know. You can be polite. I'm talking to everybody in our listening audience. If your senator voted for this thing, then call him up and be polite, but be direct. Very disappointed in your vote, Senator, voting for this deficit-busting budget, number one, and number two, voting to keep funding Planned Parenthood. Very disappointed in your vote. Hope you'll vote differently next time. We need to let them know, because otherwise they'll think they're getting away with this stuff. All right, Janet, appreciate the call. Sorry to wreck your Friday afternoon. Hope things perk up for you by the weekend. All right, let's go to Dale in Dublin, Ohio. Dale, welcome. What's on your mind?
Yesterday I was listening. There was you were talking about using the word treason.
Yeah.
And the gentleman that had called in relating to that, I thought he was going to mention this, but he didn't, and then it was too late. But the actual oath of office, I believe that military and police take, where they talk about defending the Constitution of the country against enemies, both foreign and domestic.
Yeah.
So they have a constitutional obligation to, if somebody's being treasonous inside the country, they got an obligation to fight against that as well.
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily have to be an armed conflict.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that happened back in the 1950s with Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. They stole nuclear secrets from the United States, and they sold them, gave them to the Russians. Well, they wound up being executed for that. They were enemies of the domestic variety, and they paid the ultimate price for their treason. All right, Dale, very, very good phone call. Thanks for that reminder. Let's go to Michael in Vidalia, Louisiana. Michael, welcome. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Brother Brian? Request permission to come aboard.
Permission to come aboard. Man your battle station, sailor.
Yes, sir. Real quick, I got one thing that I'd like to say. Well, actually, two. The memo come out and all this is coming out. Kids need to start rolling right here, right now. Go in, just tell everybody, look, if you are a holdover from the last administration, you're fired out of here. Go right now. No questions asked. Let that come from our president on amnesty. I got one question here. If I agree with you that the president is playing chess, everybody else, I believe, is playing Chinese checkers. But if he wants to double down and give amnesty to now I'm not for amnesty to give it in America first. All these people, if you're going to give them amnesty, All right, when they all have to go to a special website, they have to register. Whoever registers of the 108,000 people, or however many it is, now we have them on to do the E-Verify. Now, if you go out and you get one speeding ticket or a jaywalking ticket, you are now deported from here. That null avoids anything, and you do not get Miranda rights. You do not get any kind of constitutional, what covers us by American laws, Americans for our laws. Y'all don't get them, and you cannot, will not, shall not ever be able to vote in any of our elections. So, thank you. God
All right,
bless
Michael. I think that's a good idea, and that's been bandied around. In fact, one of the immigration bills, the one that Tom Cotton, I don't remember who else was in that with him, maybe Ben Sass, but their immigration bill would allow for amnesty for the DACA recipients, just the 700,000, not the 1.8 million, but those that actually signed up. The 1.8 million that Donald Trump is talking about, he's going to let people that never signed up. They had the opportunity, they were invited to sign up, and they didn't do it. He's giving them overtime to sign up, and then they'll get in on the same deal. The Cotton bill just applied to the 700,000, but it also said they will have permanent residency, but they will never be allowed to become citizens. Now, I think the American people might be willing to settle for amnesty for all the reasons that are obvious. They might be willing to accept it, to kind of swallow hard and take it. But I think if Donald Trump wants to sell that to the American people, you got to pull voting rights out of that whole deal, make it impossible. Because if they get voting rights, you get 1.8 million, could be 3.6 million, could be higher than that. It's going to change the political complexion of this country. 3.6 million DACA recipients, if they all become legalized, could turn 5 or 6 states from red to blue virtually overnight. All right, let's go to, is it Janet in Montgomery, Texas? Janet, welcome. What's on your mind?
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good. What's up?
2 quick comments. Was our president AWOL yesterday or last night? Number one. And number two, I'm really disappointed about all of the yes votes. Wonder if those guys were wearing heels with their skirts.
Well, that is the question. I'm with you, Janet. Our female callers showing more testosterone today than 28 or however many it was Republican senators up on Capitol Hill. All right, Janet, I appreciate that. And Donald Trump, for my money, was AWOL because, but Donald Trump, he's never pretended to be a small government guy. We knew that about him when he was running for office. He's never pretended to be about the budget. He never talked about balancing the budget, never talked about reducing spending, never once talked about that stuff. So it does not surprise me. So I wouldn't accuse him of betraying a promise to his voters because he never made a promise like that to us. Let's go to Ann in Fulton, Mississippi. Welcome, Ann. What's on your mind? Talk to me.
Yes. Hi, Brian. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I called my senators to let them know how very, very, very unhappy I was with them. And I told them my name, my address, and I hope they write me and try and get out of this. Because I'm going to get it, blast them with both barrels.
Well, I guarantee you, Ann, they will try to hide behind the military budget, and you remind them that's why you need to do separate appropriations bills like the law and the Constitution require you to do. So don't let them wriggle off the hook by hiding behind the military. They know you guys need to do that part of the budget all by itself as a standalone appropriation. All right, Ann, appreciate the call, and thanks for contacting your senators. That's what we all need to do. All right, last call of the week. Let's go to Scott, Big Sandy, Tennessee. Scott, got about 30 seconds. Hit me with your best shot.
Okay, Brian, shed a little light on why these people are voting the way they are. They know how to play the game. They're doing it very effectively. It's just that what they're doing is showing their true colors to where we really should pay attention. Corker and Flake, both voting the way they did, They know what the bill's going to be like. They know what's going to be passing. It's a safe vote for them. So they can go back and say, I voted that way when Flake wants to be president. These people are all traitors to that point when they are showing who they are. And they know they can't be hurt by voting this way. It wasn't a close vote. They didn't need their vote.
Yeah. All right, I appreciate the call, Scott. Thank you for that. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, to bow low before God, stand tall before man, stand in the gap. Never forget, we are fighting a winnable war. See you on Monday.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio. American Family Coffee is coffee with a cause. Not only is it a delicious way to start your day, but it can also wake you up to the idea of supporting the American Family Association through a product you'd normally buy anyway. Choose